A sparkling happy Tuesday evening to you, aviation aficionados. I have a piece of paper right here. You can see it. It's an actual piece of paper. It says that on Tuesday, November 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I should be right here talking to you, and I'd like to think I am doing that. Over there, I'm Jamie Beckett, by the way. It says there on the bottom, the Florida ambassador for the AOPA Foundation. Right over there is my good buddy, Pat Brown, who's holding down the Texas section of the corporate. Hey, he's got paper too. I like it. And way behind the scenes, you can't even see him. He's so far back, there is no way. We've never even seen him. Our producer, Donnie McKay, is making all this stuff happen. We're pretty psyched. Mike B., right back to you, buddy. I'm glad to have you here, and feel free to participate. Tonight, by the way, you might have noticed there's been a theme recently with these programs. We've been talking about airspace, and Pat, I believe we talked about non-towered airports.
Right.
Then we talked about towered airports. Right. Then we got real sassy and talked about Bravo and Charlie and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we were pushing the edge on that one.
Yeah. So now I figure we should really kind of close the loop and talk about special use airspace. How do you feel about that?
I couldn't feel better about it, Jamie. Actually, it's like we planned it.
Oh, my goodness. It's just coming together. I love it. Well, actually, we did want to talk about Mark Grady just got sarcastic. I don't know if you saw that in the comments. The legends of aviation. Mark Grady used to like you. Now I'm going to have to put you on the naughty kids list. And I'm sorry, I'm not sending you a Christmas card after that. Hey, Eric Pittman.
I got to tell you about Mark. Mark and I met each other many, many years ago when we were both doing Air Safety Institute presentations for ASI. And he was one of the first presenters that I saw do it. And this is all kidding aside, I'm not making a joke here. He is the one that kind of inspired me to ask AOPA if they would allow me to be an ASI presenter. For some unknown reason, J.J. Greenway, who at the time was head of that, said yes. I don't know if he regrets it or not, but I owe Mark a lot. I love you, buddy. So thanks for writing in.
You know, I didn't know that. Small world. The first Rusty pilot I ever saw was Mark Grady in St. Simons Island, Georgia. And I saw it and I'm like, I could do that. Not as well as he does, but I could do it and get away with it. And Dave Schaubetter says, sarcastic, Mark Grady? Say anything. So I'm sorry for all these in-jokes, but it's really nice to see you all here. I appreciate you. How much to fly to Nigeria? I don't know, Michael Okafor, but tonight, very special event. Our buddy Kay Sundaram, who is normally fulfilling the role of a West Coast, Southern California ambassador, tonight is in Texas. And Pat, I hear this is true. It is possible for two people to be in Texas, and that state is so large, in an entire day, they don't even necessarily bump into each other. Is that true?
No, that's true. As a matter of fact, if you want to drive from one end of Texas to the other, you might as well drive from Washington, D.C. down to the tip of Florida because it's about the same distance.
Yes, and I have done that drive. By the way, mad props to Eric Pittman. Eric Pittman's in Columbia, South Carolina. He's an assistant manager at a Publix store. And folks, it's 2 days before Thanksgiving. That boy's working. He's also that close to his private pilot check ride. So good luck to you, Eric. I hope you see this on the replay. And Jordan Tipton, what do we think about air traffic controllers? You know, they're getting the flow of this, Pat, because we have a topic, special use airspace, but we work for you guys, the viewers, so you can ask anything you want. Jordan Tipton, that is a very open question. I will tell you, there have been times where I was so happy to have an air traffic controller on the other end of the radio. And maybe a couple times, like when they said, let us know when you're ready to copy down a number, that was not my favorite person. How about you, Pat?
You know, by and large, air traffic controllers are amazing people. They really are. And they, on a daily basis, they work miracles. I have an enormous amount of respect for air traffic controllers. Awesome people.
There's actually a Facebook group called The Landline that's controllers talking to each other, talking to pilots, and you can get an awful lot of insight into what controllers think about us, the pilots, if you read the landline.
You know something? There's another Facebook page out there. It's called Ask a Pilot, Ask an Air Traffic Controller. I believe I'm a member of it, and I think that's it. Ask a Pilot, Ask an Air Traffic Controller, or Ask an Air Traffic Controller, Ask a Pilot. But basically, it's something kind of like what you're talking about. It encourages the two groups to really have an open dialogue, and it's good as well. I didn't know about the landline. I'll try that one.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. And Jordan just said he's been with ATC 20 years. He's also a pilot. Not all air traffic controllers are pilots, folks. So when you meet one that's a controller and a pilot, that's a bonus. Jordan works in Miami, so I'm going to guess I've spoken to Jordan at some point.
Yeah, you probably have, and I'm looking back now at that very first question. Jordan says, "What do you guys think about air traffic controllers?" Now, knowing he is one, I'm glad I didn't say anything ugly.
Jordan, you have our total respect. Really, really do, and we will admonish ourselves appropriately after this program ends. So, hey, Pat, here in Florida, it is remarkably cold right now. It was actually in the 50s when I got up this morning. It will be in the 40s tomorrow. So as you know, I'm not going out. So that's the perfect time for me to sit down and do some research. And I started looking into special use airspace because we have a lot of questions about that in Rusty Pilots. At least I do. Yeah. What's your experience with people being a little fuzzy on the broad concept of special use airspace?
Well, you know, they see the marks on the map, and to a lot of people, they're just kind of mumbo jumbo stuff. You know, there are some nuances to it. Differences between military operations areas and alert areas, for example, may not be immediately apparent, because if you look at them individually, they look identical. The only thing is, one says MOA, the other says A-something, but otherwise they look identical. Same thing with some of the other special use airspaces out there. They're very, very similar. Wildlife refuges versus, you know, some of the others. There's another, I forget what it's called. I think you've got a graphic on it. In fact, Donnie, do you have that graphic that Jamie sent you with that blue circle with the dots in it? Yeah, there you go.
National Wildlife Refuge, yeah.
And the interesting thing about that is that if you look at a similar marking in the land, over the land, it's likely going to be magenta with dots in the middle. The difference is that that's special use airspace on land. Out in the ocean like this, it's also special use airspace. So this is controlled by NOAA, and if you bust that could be a $10,000 fine. You're just asked not to fly lower than 2,000 feet on land when it's a magenta color, but out there you could be fined $10,000 if you bust that one. So it's not real common, but there are several of them out there on the left coast.
You know, there's some things that are similar that aren't even charted. It's worth having local knowledge. I'll give you an example. Here in Polk County, Florida, where I live, right in the center of the peninsula, there's an elephant farm. Remember when Ringling Brothers retired all their elephants? They came here, and you can't see it from the road. It's set way back from the road, but when you fly, you can see it, and it's cows, citrus, cows, citrus. Hey, those aren't cows. It's not a charted thing, but you also don't want to be the person who buzzes the elephants and starts an elephant stampede, because then you get on the news and people are asking questions and your neighbors don't want to know you. So there's actually a reason these are there. As Pat said, that, you know, it's recommended you don't fly under a certain altitude over a wildlife refuge area. Yeah. But those ones that are NOAA, you really want to take that seriously, because you are messing with the feds here.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike B has a question: is why does York in Pennsylvania have a red dotted line around the airport? I thought at first it was class D, but now if dotted versus dashed, that's two different things. If it's actually a dash, if it looks like class Delta except it's magenta, then that's class Echo to the surface. I'd actually have to see it on the chart, but my guess is it's probably class Echo to the surface if it's a magenta dashed line that otherwise looks like class Delta.
Mike, if you can get a screenshot of that and put it up in the comments, we'll give you an answer after this, because I'm not familiar with York, Pennsylvania. And Jordan Tipton comes in with last question. This is not the same as last call, Pat. That's a whole different thing. Last question. For the Florida pilot, I guess that's me. What do you think about the new Miami Metroplex airspace, Jamie? I am a couple hundred miles north of that. And to tell you the truth, I haven't been down there since they have Metroplexed it up. So I couldn't tell you, but I'll ask for you by name next time I get flight following down that way and see if we can work together. How would that be? Let's start on special used airspace, Pat, with the big dog. Let's go with prohibited areas.
Okay.
There's not a lot of them. I think about 9, 10 in the whole country.
Probably.
But and you got one in your state. I've got one in my state.
Yep.
They're not kidding around. Donnie, do you have a picture of a prohibited area? Whoa, look at that. A prohibited area, P49. Go ahead, Pat. You wanna explain the nuance of the prohibited area?
Yeah, prohibited. Yeah, don't go there.
That's nuance. Well, what's that? What's that town just to the southeast of that prohibited area?
Yeah, that's Crawford, Texas. That's where former President Bush II has his ranch. And in fact, his ranch is located right there in the center of that prohibited area. If I remember right, now that he is a former president, and while that prohibited area is still active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it is, I think, only up to 2,000 feet. So you can actually fly over his ranch and see the complex down. There's a really beautiful ranch. But back when he was president, and when he was there, from the center of that circle and 30-mile radius of that circle, so 60 miles across, it was a temporary flight restriction that was there anytime he was there, up to 18,000 feet, and special procedures to fly through it. When he was there, it was actually a TFR with that prohibited area in the middle.
Yeah, every once in a while we get these things where you'll see a YouTube video of some pilot who's either lost or just wasn't paying attention, and they're inside the Bravo. That's not great. There's that famous one of the guy going through the Las Vegas Bravo who's arguing with the controller.
I haven't got time to write. I haven't got time to take a number. I'm flying an airplane.
Like that one. But yeah, prohibited area though is no kidding. It's prohibited. So you've got the Bush Ranch out there. You've got a submarine base here in Florida. You've got Camp David, things like that. They really are prohibited. And Pat and I talk about this periodically. We have great instrumentation now with GPS and your phone and your tablet and the GPS in the panel. Don't be that guy who's flying along saying, I'm a good 100 yards outside that prohibited area. There's some real nervous people protecting that, and they're probably using less sophisticated stuff. So be wide from it.
You're right about that, because special use airspace, I mean, all airspace in general, Class Bravo and all that other kind of stuff. Donnie says he's got a shot of York. Don't put it up quite yet, Donnie, but let's see. I've actually forgotten what I was going to say.
Special use airspace and getting right up to the edge of it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that, Jamie. It's a senior moment. All that airspace is measured by radar, and radar is not going to be as accurate as GPS. So, don't be flying, like what Jamie said, right up to the edge of it and expect that you're going to be forgiven if you should bust it, because they're going to take a look at the radar returns, not necessarily what you've got on your map. And before Donnie puts up that thing there, Sherman Gardner says, "Hey, Pat Brown, Sherman runs In the Pattern, which is a tremendous flight school up at Denton, Texas, DTO. In fact, they just won an AOPA Flight Training Excellence Award for Outstanding Flight School, or Superior. I don't remember exactly what. I think it was Outstanding Flight School, and it's well deserved. They have built a remarkable business over just the last, I don't know what, Sherman, it's been 4 years or so, something like that. So they've done a great job up there. Congratulations, by the way. Well deserved. In the Pattern.
Like it, like it. And let's go ahead and take a look at that graphic from Mike B, if you don't mind, Donnie. And Christopher Ritchie says, can a pilot get insurance in case a pilot busts that airspace? You can get non-owned aircraft insurance, which will pay for your lawyer in case of an accident, and that's what you're going to need. So no, you can't get insurance that's like you've got to get out of TFR free. No, you've got to stay out of that.
However, you can join AOPA's legal plan.
That's true. That's true.
If you have an encounter, a close encounter of the third kind with the FAA, you might have to avail yourself of that. But hopefully, Sherman says almost 4 years. Hopefully you won't ever have to avail yourself of that. But it's there.
You know, I didn't even think to mention that, Pat, because you and I both are in that plan. But that's true. If you're an AOPA member, you can purchase, and this is a direct answer to Christopher's question, you can purchase the pilot protection plan, which is part of it. And we do have legal staff. We have medical people. There's all kinds of benefits. So I didn't mean to seem flippant, Christopher. You can. That's the thing. Go ahead and throw up that graphic if you would now, just so we don't lose Mike B's thought. And this is what he's talking about, Pat. And I think he means a dashed line, not a dotted line.
Yes, that's Class Echo airspace to the ground. Your cloud clearance and visibility requirements are your 3152s, 3 miles, 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontally. Outside that area, Class Echo begins at 700 feet. With Class Golf below that, and outside that shaded area, the hard line of that shaded area, Class Echo starts at 1,200 feet, again with the 3152 rule in the Class Echo airspace. So yeah, that's exactly what it is, Class Echo.
And the good news about that is in Class Echo airspace, you have ATC services. So if you're a VFR pilot and you're using VFR flight following, you could potentially keep that all the way into the traffic pattern because that Echo airspace goes all the way to the ground. Am I correct on that, Mr. DPE examiner, Pat?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I check everything with Pat before I go public normally, but this time I spoke out of turn. And Sherman, I like this. You're right. You have to avoid the prohibited area of President Bush's Crawford Ranch, but you can overfly SpaceX where they launch rockets. And here in Florida, we also have a small rocket facility off on the East Coast. You can overfly that most days. I've actually landed on the shuttle landing strip, which is pretty cool. I did like that. But you can do what is called the tour. And they'll vector you over there. You can fly over there as long as they're not actually launching a rocket right then. But that being said, I think we should move on to the next level. Beyond the prohibited areas, the next scary one, the restricted area, Pat. What's in a restricted area anyhow? Is that where the good donuts are, or is it just something else?
It's just restricted stuff. That's all. Well, I'll give you a really good example. Eglin Air Force Base, which is in the Panhandle of Florida, kind of not very far from your neck of the woods down there, Jamie. We were coming back from Sun and Fun several years ago, and we were worried about a little bit of weather that was blowing in from the west, and we wanted to get to Mobile, where we had planned to stop overnight before that weather got there. And we had plenty of time built into our flight plan and so on and so forth. But just to get a little bit extra wiggle room, as we were handed off to Eglin Approach, I called him up and asked him if we could transit the restricted area that takes us right over the top of Eglin Air Force Base. And after about 2 seconds, they said cleared direct Mobile from wherever our present position was, and right over the top of Eglin Air Force Base, right through the restricted area, right during active. It was active, but they allowed us to do it. So oftentimes, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, they are interesting places. There is one south of me. We affectionately refer to it as the Avon Park bombing range. But it is that. It's hot usually during the days, and the aircraft from MacDill Air Force Base come over here and use it. But it can be hot or cold because a restricted area isn't prohibited, it's restricted. Sometimes you can use it, sometimes you can't. It's the same controlling agency. Yeah, thank you, Donnie. Not the red circle, but the blue hash line, R3203 Delta. Or Alpha and Bravo, that's a 3-tiered restricted area. Sometimes there will be something going on in there. It becomes hot. and whoever the controlling agency that would give you VFR flight following will take care of you there. They can tell you if it's hot or cold. If it's cold, you can go through it. If it's hot, not only can't you, you really shouldn't. And I bring up the Avon Park Bomb Range because when it's cold, they're perfectly happy to let you fly over it. That's my route to Vero Beach when I get on there. And it's kind of neat because there's all these shot up aircraft carcasses and runways and buildings because they do live exercises there. They do real strafing and dropping bombs and such. And I've actually flown into Sebring on a beautiful, clear, calm day, just absolutely stunning morning. Fly in, and you have this great vista off to the east with the ocean. And then when I depart, there's nothing but dust in the air because they're firing into the dirt. So take restricted areas seriously. That's not someplace you want to wander into just because, oh, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Pat, or have we covered restricted areas?
I think we've covered restricted areas just fine. Now, Ed, Sue per CEW. I'm sorry, Ed, if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Says, where can you find a description of all 8 types of Class Echo airspace? We know we didn't mention the fact that there are actually 8 types of Class Echo airspace. We do in Rusty Pilot sometimes. Ed, I have a list of those. If you'll email me. It's first name dot last name at AOPA.org. It might take me a day or two to get that to you because in precisely 25 minutes, I'm signing off to go jump on a Southwest Airlines airplane to go up to Denver. But I'll have my computer with me. So send me an email and I will find that list I've got somewhere in my archives, and I'll be happy to send that to you.
What a great customer service effort. I like that. Ed, he really does know what he's talking about. So send him that email, pat.brown@aopa.org. You could send it to me, jamie.beckett@aopa.org, but I'm just going to forward it on to Pat, and he's still going to answer you because I'm what's colloquially known as lazy and apparently not particularly good with English words.
Oh, by the way, Ed, where I found that description was a little known reference site called Google. Google.
I'm sorry, can you spell that?
Well, it's it's the repository of the entire world's knowledge as it is. So actually, I did find it on Google. So if you want to do that, that's fine. But if you don't, that's perfectly okay. Send me an email and I'll see if I can find it for you and send it to you. I've got it somewhere.
Yeah, they're actually everything's out there. By the way, we just talked about restricted areas. I'm going to make a seamless segue that nobody's even going to notice. It's so smooth. Directly at the warning areas. Now, as I learned in flight school, a warning area is essentially a restricted area, but it's outside. It's offshore. It's outside the contiguous 48. Is that your understanding, Pat, or do you have some special superpower insight beyond that?
No, I know except that unlike a restricted area, you can fly through a warning area. You don't have to ask permission. You can fly through it. And I certainly wouldn't. There might be submarine shooting missiles from under the ocean or something like that. But you can. It's just I wouldn't. So that's really all you need. If you're flying offshore, if you fly far enough, you're going to run into a warning area somewhere at some point. That's it.
And there's just stuff out there, even in a powerful aircraft. Like, for instance, if I was in like a red Comanche, that's a very popular plane. There's stuff out there I really don't want to mess with. That might have better performance than a Comanche. I mean, it could happen. Would you agree?
I guess I would agree. I'm not sure where it came from, but okay.
See, this is an in-joke. We went through a whole thing once where people kept writing in, have you flown the red Comanche? Have you flown the green Comanche? Because Pat's apparently flown 92% of all Comanches ever built.
93, but who's counting?
Hey, let's talk about military operations area. And there's a little bit of an addendum to that. There's a special one that is less common. But what's your basic operational plan around an MOA, Pat? Let's say you're flying VFR around Texas and you come upon an MOA.
And we have a few of them, a lot of them kind of in central and south central Texas, Randolph Air Force Base and whatnot around San Antonio. MOAs, once again, you do not need permission to fly through an MOA, whether it's hot or cold. I would say it could be in your best interest to be talking to flight following when you're going through an MOA, because if you haven't done your due diligence and you don't realize it's active, you could find yourself flying formation with some F-16s or something that are out there doing some sort of military operations, and they just might, for grins, decide to form up on you just to mess with you. And they have been known to do that. So word of the wise, if you're flying through an MOA, at least do due diligence, find out whether it's going to be active or not. If you're using ForeFlight or one of those types of devices, you can actually tap on the screen inside the MOA, and it'll light it up, and it'll tell you what the controlling agency is and what the dates of operations and so on and so forth. You can also look, Donnie, if you have that graphic, I think that in that end column or end plate, whatever it was I sent you earlier today, if you've got that handy and you look on right there, that's actually out of the Aeronautical Chart Users Guide, but that's on an end tab of a sectional chart. You remember those sectional charts, Jamie? They're large and colorful and printed on paper.
The things I used to carry until about 8 months ago. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. But yeah, so use flight following. You don't have to, but it certainly would be wise to do so.
Yeah, I like your idea of flight following a lot. I mean, there's MOAs down here in Florida I go through routinely, but they start at 7,000 feet, and I'm lower than that because I live on a sandbar. There's no reason for me to get up high. But I was flying up to Maryland once to headquarters, and I believe I was in Georgia. And I was vectored around an MOA, and it was just their way of saying it's actively being used. You're in a 152, they're in F-16s. Maybe you want to widen out a little bit, and I appreciate it. So that's just another great reason to use VFR flight following. And I got to give you credit, Pat, for bringing up the Aeronautical Chart Users Guide. That's one of the lesser-known publications the FAA puts out. It's available free as a PDF. Yeah. It's got virtually every symbol that's on any IFR or VFR chart, approach plates, everything. It's a fantastic user's guide, and it's free. So why not just download it and keep a copy on your computer desktop, and when you need to find something, go look it up.
Yeah, if you do a search for Aeronautical Chart Users Guide, I think it's the first one that comes up on the Google search is the FAA website. If you click on that, you get the PDF and download it, put it on your iPad or what have you. And you always have it. Updates for free. Go at it.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Pat, but there's a great misconception in the American aeronautical world that I'm smart. I'm not. I just know how to look things up. That's my entire skill set. I know how to look things up.
You have a lot of people fooled.
Well, hey, speaking of fooling people, Donnie, can I see that special military flight rule? You know what I'm talking about, the black lines? Yeah, thank you. This is a special military activity area, the black lines, and they're kind of vertical or horizontal, different ways depending on the turn. You'll notice there is an IFR military route right down the center of that. These things, there's one here up around the Big Bend of Florida, and it goes all the way across the peninsula, across Gainesville. There's only a few of these in the United States, but they're kind of telling you there's going to be some intensity of military traffic in here. By the way, these might be manned flights. They might be unmanned flights. So keep your eyes open and be aware of it. You don't see them everywhere, but that's something that popped up not too long ago, and it is not in the Aeronautical Chart Users Guide. So you kind of got to do a little extra snooping around. But you notice in that graphic Donnie showed, and doesn't Donnie do a great job of showing graphics? It says right up there, special military activity, Gainesville radio on 122.2 for activity status. So if you remember at one time, 122.2 was a different thing. Now you're calling them in and just find out, is there anything going on here or not? Because as Pat says, if you end up with a couple military aircraft off your way unexpectedly, ooh, that can be an interesting flight.
Yeah, that 122.2 is actually the universal flight service frequency. If you're above 5,000 feet, almost anywhere in the United States, you can reach flight service, in this case, Gainesville radio, but that's 122.2. They're using it for two purposes at that point. You bring up military training routes, and I think it's important for folks to know that those things can be anywhere from 4 to 16 miles wide. They may not be flying right over that little gray line. And here's another thing, we probably all know that the VR followed by some numbers is visual, and IR followed by some numbers is instrument. What you don't realize is next time you're looking at a military training route, look around and see if you can find any adjacent military training routes, and see if you can find a difference in the width of the gray line. Because if it's a skinny gray line, then that military training route has a width of 5 miles or less. If it's a slightly fatter gray line, and it's kind of subtle, but if it's a slightly fatter gray line, it's more than 5 miles. So even the width of the military training route indication on the map can tell you a lot about that. And even though the military training route, if it has 3 digits, it's generally above 1,500 feet. If it has 4 digits, it's generally below 1,500 feet. That's not a hard and fast rule. They can be jets at any altitude, anywhere, and there could be multiple altitudes along any given route that changes as the route changes. And by the way, there is a speed limit on military training routes, Jamie. It's 420 knots.
Yeah, I can do that in the 152 if I'm downhill full power with the wings falling off. By the way, you're right. I'm glad you pointed that out. Those military training routes, they go from the flight levels down to just a couple hundred feet. So they're where we are. So be aware of those. You don't want to parallel that military training route. And in a place like that where they have the black hash lines, you just want to be aware. There's something going on in there, and you want to keep your head on a swivel. Yeah. How about, Pat, alert areas? We have a bunch of that kind of activity down in South Florida. Do you have any in Texas?
Yeah, we've got a couple of them, again, over in San Antonio. We might have some in North Texas, but I know the two over in San Antonio. And that's just basically a high-intensity flight training. It could be, they're around the Air Force bases over in San Antonio. So more than likely, you've got airplanes up there doing pattern work, or perhaps they're doing overhead brakes or something, some of that Top Gun hotshot military stuff that most of us mere mortals don't do. So for an alert area, again, you don't need permission to fly through it, but it would be in your best interest, and everyone else's for that matter, to participate in flight following. So be real careful around alert areas. And happy Thanksgiving to you too, Carlos. Carlos is my neighbor. He lives he lives about 10 houses down from me on an adjacent street. I did his check ride about a month ago. Had a lot of fun flying with him. So
nice.
Neighbors. Happy Thanksgiving, Carlos.
Absolutely. And Donnie just had Ed's question or comment really about reading charts should not be a game of Trivial Pursuit. You know what, though? I got to give kudos to the FAA. I do a presentation, a safety presentation that uses some chart sectionals from 1966. And the basic information is there, but the information we have now on a VFR chart is remarkable. And it really is incumbent on the pilot to learn what all this stuff means. Remember, there is a regulation that as PIC, you have a responsibility to be familiar with all available information. They're giving it to us in a very concise method. I guess I think of it, Pat, like reading a METAR. That's not English, but once you learn to do it, it's actually really easy, and it's a great way to convey information. Yeah. Sectional charts, IFR, low altitude charts, they provide so much meaningful information to us. If we just learn what it means, and that chart user's guide is out there, and there's CFIs all over, and there's pilot associations and all sorts of resources you can use, that really does make us a lot safer. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, Pat, I think that's part of the reason that aviation is safer and safer decade after decade, because we have more information and we're not surprised by things that just popped up, didn't know.
No, that's true. And, Ed, I couldn't agree with you more. We're having some fun today and having some laughs, but it is deadly serious. when you're in the real world and you're in the airplane, one of the special emphasis items I put on my check rides when I'm doing a really private or commercial in particular, those are the two that you really have to kind of drill down on. We spend a lot of time talking about airspace, cloud clearance, visibility, kind of stuff in the various airspaces, and chart symbology. And I am frequently unpleasantly surprised at how an applicant will have to go to the legend on the backside of his or her sectional chart and look for something that is just something that really, ground school 101, you ought to know. I had a couple of check rides over the last month where the applicants actually had to draw that little Rod Machado triangle to tell me what, I point my finger at an airspace. So, we're 6,500 feet right here. What kind of airspace are we in? Okay, let me get the thing out and draw the chart out. Oh, we're in class Echo. Okay, so are you going to have a chance to do that when you're actually flying along and you run up against one of those little lines or something on the chart and you don't know what that is? Are you going to have a chance or time to draw that little triangle out to work? No, you're not. So yeah, we're having some fun with it, and I hope the folks that are listening understand that we're not trying to treat it lightly, even though we're having some fun with it.
Absolutely. By the way, Jennifer has just brought some class to the room and said, hi there, fellas. I like that. Hey, Jennifer, nice to have you here. And Mr. Jazz Tube asks a really good question. Is there an easy way to determine which military areas do require permission for entry and which don't? We talked about VFR flight following before. I'm a huge proponent of VFR flight following for a lot of reasons. But when you're coming up on MOAs and restricted areas and prohibited areas and all those kind of things, they're controlled by the same people you're talking to on VFR flight following. So you don't have to search around for a frequency. You don't have to think about it. If you're headed for a restricted area, for example, that's hot, and you're on VFR flight following, they're likely to call you up and say, hey, Piper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that restricted area is hot, right? And, oh, yeah, I was about to turn right here. Yeah. So, yeah, there is an easy way, Mr. Jazz Tube, and there's nothing wrong with using those resources to your advantage. What do you say, Pat?
Yeah, up in Killeen, Texas, which is kind of in central Texas, there are a bunch of prohibited and restricted areas and things like that up there. And I was going to see a friend of mine in Gatesville, and that airport is right on the edge. I mean, right on the edge of, I think it's a prohibited area. It might be restricted, but I was flying up there, and I had the autopilot set. The heading bug was set so that I would miss that area. But as I got closer to it, the ATC guy said, "You're familiar with that area, right?" Yes, I am. In fact, I'm navigating around it. He said, "Well, let me give you a heading to help you a little bit." And so he gave me a heading a few degrees further away than I was heading. Because once again, my GPS is more accurate than his radar, and he's going by his radar. And so he helped me. And as soon as he got me to a point where he could say, you can proceed direct to Gatesville, he just said, proceed direct Gatesville, and boom, no harm, no foul. And one of those areas that I was flying next to was a live fire tank range.
Yes.
Yeah.
This leads us into the next topic, and I'm actually glad Mr. Jazz Tube asked that particular question when he did, because the next two things we're going to talk about are controlled firing areas and national security areas, neither of which is actually charted. And that's an issue. And as you say, you were going over a place where they're firing actual tanks with actual ammo. That's a firing area. It's not charted, but if you're using VFR flight following as your example, Pat, they'll kind of keep you out of trouble because the controller knows something is happening that you don't necessarily know. Yeah. And that can be a great comfort. So the controlled firing areas are worth being aware of, that those are out there. There are places where not just aeronautical military things, but there's ground operations going on, and they'll steer you out of the way. Pat, that's a great story to share because not that many of us have experienced that, and it's worth it.
Yeah, it's easy to deal with. Just talk to flight following. Now, one thing I will take a minor exception to is that national security areas, those can be charted. If you look at a national security area, it's usually a fairly small circle, it's going to, I don't think we've got a graphic on it because there aren't very many of them around, but it's a small circle, it's magenta, and it's a dashed magenta line, but the lines are much longer and they're much fatter. So don't mistake a national security, and oftentimes it'll be around something like, it might say like an armory, or it could say
nuclear power plant.
Nuclear power plant. Although we've got South Texas nuclear power plant, there's not one around that for some reason. I don't know why, but they're not that common. But if you run across a small circle, that'll be probably on a sectional chart be probably about the size of a nickel, with fairly wide lines and longer, but still dashed. That's a national security area.
Outstanding. Pat, we've got about 5 minutes left with you, and I appreciate your time. So I'm going to answer Phil P's question real quick and let you do a follow-up to Mr. Jazztube. So Phil P is saying, are paper charts still required of all GA pilots, or can you use electronic flight pads instead? No, you do not have to fly with paper charts. There's actually never been a rule that you had to have a chart. You have to be familiar with all available information. So it's easier to carry a chart. Yep. Now you can use a tablet, you can use your phone, you can use those resources, and that doesn't matter if you're flying 121 with the airlines or Part 91 GA just in your Cub. You don't need to have the chart with you. You just need to be familiar with the information. And Pat, Mr. Jazztube asks a very good question. When you see the fighter jets off your wing, what do you do? And is there a frequency that you should change to?
Wave to them.
Be polite, yes.
Be polite. 121.5. If you're not sure, just go to 121.5, because if they're trying to hail you because you busted a TFR, they're trying to get you to land or something like that, they won't just go away if you ignore them. They really won't go away. So 121.5 would be your best bet. Just a real quick addendum to your reply to Phil, which, by the way, Jamie, was your typical outstanding reply. But to which I would add, Phil P., look up Advisory Circular 91-78. That's the one that says that you can use pixels instead of paper as long as you have what the Advisory Circular says, in quotes, the functional equivalent of paper. The functional equivalent of paper. So as long as you're doing, which means they've got to be current. But if you're using one of the applications out there, ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, whatever, those will do a push notification when it's time for you to update the charts.
Yeah, and Phil's got an interesting follow-up about the charts being out of control and way too complicated. They're depicting all the airspace that exists. That doesn't mean it's all active or hot. They're just giving you information. What you do with that information is up to you. And remember, as a pilot, we're in a 3D environment. We may be above that airspace, we may be beneath it, we may be in it. We can always turn to go around it. So yeah, the route between point A and point B might be different on different days just because of what's active and what's not. Yeah. Pat, I got to thank you for hanging out with me on a pre-Thanksgiving night. I know you've got to go fly someplace, and I know you hate that, but happy holidays to you. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Bulk up, buddy, because you make me feel bad. I mean, I outweigh you by like 200 pounds. And
at least.
It's been great having you around. Thanks so much. I'm going to let you go and just have your night. I'm going to deal with these people for a little while. But I think have a wonderful time. And great, Ben. It has been great hanging out with you, as always.
Happy Thanksgiving, my friend. Donnie, thank you for everything. Everybody that's listening and has taken part in this this madness for the last year that we've been doing it. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Eat too much turkey, and happy Thanksgiving, Martin. See you later. Bye, y'all.
Take care, Pat. And Steve Cortez just chimed in with hope you enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday. Steve used to be essentially a neighbor of mine. He lived down here in Florida for a while. Coolest guy in the world. Just really, that's part of what I love about aviation. You meet the greatest people. And Steve was certainly one of those. Then for some unknown reason, he moved north where it gets cold and it snows and there's ice. I don't understand it, but he's happy, and that's what's important. And Phil P, Jennifer, that's what Pat does. He comes up with great answers. He's terrific. I kind of want to talk to you about something a little different as we close out tonight, because it's Thanksgiving. And I want to show some respect and thanks for a friend of mine named Janessa Duffy. And this may relate to you too. Janessa is a big dog at Icon Aircraft. She flies the A5. I've flown with her a number of times. I've known her for many years. It doesn't look like she's old enough to have been known for many years, but let me tell you, this woman is a true pro. She's really something. She's a great flight instructor. She's actually in charge of all the pilots at Icon, but she had an interesting experience lately. Just a few days ago, she was in Tampa, where they have a training base for Icon, and she took an Icon A5 out into Tampa Bay to do a return to service flight. She was on the water doing a bilge pump test, make sure everything's working, and heard on the radio that an airplane was going down in the vicinity of the bay. So Janessa took it upon herself, took off, got up in the air, located the airplane, which had sunk almost immediately. So it was beneath the water. There's somebody in the water with a life vest that she could see. She circled, made sure it was clear. She landed and started to taxi up to that person with a life vest when she realized there was another person in the water who didn't have a life vest, and they appeared to be struggling. So Janessa taxied up to them very carefully, had a little difficulty because the winds, had to drift back into them, sailing, if you're a seaplane person, was able to pull him up onto the sea wing of the airplane, get him into a life jacket, and that made it much easier for the surface craft, the boats coming out to help these folks find them, because instead of looking for a submerged airplane, they can now see a bright white Icon A5 right on the surface. Janessa literally saved a guy's life, and I'm extraordinarily proud of her. She's a good friend, but I tell you this story for a reason. A number of years ago, I wrote a story about Janessa because she has impressed me for quite a while, and I write for General Aviation News and AOPA publications, and I did a profile on Janessa. And there was a lot of backlash. I mean, a lot of really vicious, unpleasant backlash, because people were commenting on a young girl with a bunch of tattoos, and she can't be a very good CFI, and certainly she's not a professional. Let me leave you with this message on Thanksgiving. For all of you, no matter what you're doing, no matter what phase you're in, whether you're a student pilot, whether you're just thinking about learning to fly, whether you've been flying for years, whatever you are, that's good enough. If you're short, if you're tall, whatever ethnic group you belong to, whatever race you identify with, whatever gender you are, whether you've got tattoos or you don't, whether you have long, luxurious hair or my fairly aerodynamic hairstyle, you're good enough. If you want to be involved in aviation, you deserve to be involved in aviation. So just keep your chin up. Think of people like Janessa, who have really done a great job in this industry. Even when there's been pushback, you really can do it. Ed Kessler says, do I know of a website to help practice identifying a type of airspace in a specific spot? I like to use skyvector.com. It's a website, skyvector.com. It allows me to look at either low-end route IFR charts or VFR charts for the entirety of the United States. It's all stitched together, so it's all very easy to find. There's no seams. I can locate it and look it up. And if I can't identify what it is there, Ed, I can always go to the Aeronautical Chart User's Guide, which we spoke about before. It's available for free as a PDF. And if you happen to have a paper chart, everything that's on that chart is explained in the legend, which is printed on it. So yeah, you can learn anything. There's no symbol, there's no marking the FAA uses that they don't decode someplace. Glenn DeSena says she rocks. I think he's talking about Janessa because he knows her too. Jonathan G says, happy Thanksgiving to both of you. It's always amazing to learn from two amazing pilots. Jonathan G, the other one left. It's just me now. But thank you, sir. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's good to see you. Frank White says, thank you for that, Jamie. Well said. I like to think every once in a while I accidentally say something smart, Frank, but I mean that in all sincerity. Aviation has been too exclusive for too long. There's no reason for it. I've had fantastic students who were short petite women who really turned out to be great pilots. I've had absolute dolts who are big football player guys. There is no typical pilot that you can identify and say that person's going to do it. And I'm going to bet Jonathan G is actually a high school student who I happen to work with who soloed not long ago. And Jonathan is somebody I'm really impressed with. So it doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what phase of life you're in. None of that matters. If you want to fly, if you want to get involved, fly. You can always write to us, by the way. Donnie is ahead of the game, as he always is. You can write to us at ambassadors@aopa.org. Send any question you've got in your head, anything you want. If you need help with something, that's what we're here for. We'll find a way to help you. Michael Hackett points out SkyVector shows temporary TFRs too. Yes, they do. I really like that. You know, I mentioned earlier, I'm in Florida where we have the Space Coast. So TFRs pop up there. That restricted area is very complex. We get TFRs that pop up. Yeah, there we are on the coast of Florida. Sorry, it was necessary to ingest some coffee there for a second. That is a very complex restricted area TFR that can disappear. It can be huge. I've actually landed on the shuttle landing strip before. You have to get special permission to do that. I'm not suggesting you should go out and try it, because if you don't have permission, that's going to be a problem. But we routinely have launches, and as a matter of fact, I was out there a few years ago, and the commandant of the range, by the way, you've heard of Space Force? Space Force is based there. Patrick Air Force Base is now Patrick Space Force Base. But the commandant of the facility there, they're gearing up for a launch a week. That's what their intent is. So that is a place where those TFRs pop up and go away, much like the small ones for sporting events. But those are big for rocket launches. So thank you, Michael, for pointing that out. That's a great one. Philip P. says, oh, my God, great hero pilot. She's saving them. Saw this on TV news. Yellow GA plane gone down in Tampa Bay. Not one word about her helping. Janessa is, and I'll tell you a little irony. Janessa started her career in the Navy as an electronics professional on submarines. And she flies for a living. Go figure. Yes, Jennifer, you are correct. There is a rocket launch out of Vandenberg tonight. I think it might have just happened, if I'm not mistaken. That's, of course, a West Coast thing, so I can't see that from my porch. But normally, I watch those launches from my porch. And by the way, being an aeronautical freak like you are, like I am, if you ever get the chance to go watch a rocket launch from a safe distance, it's amazing. And the SpaceX ones where they land the booster, it's a spectacular launch followed 8 minutes later by a spectacular landing. It's incredible. Oh my goodness, the actual Janessa Duffy is on our feed. Please, everybody say hey to Janessa Duffy and say congratulations, because that girl is amazing. If I could be anybody in aviation, and I'm not kidding, I would be Janessa Duffy. That woman's a true professional. She is a great pilot. When I fly the A5, and I really like the Icon A5 a lot. I think it's a remarkable airplane, but I wouldn't let me take it solo. But Janessa lets me fly it and talks me through everything. She is absolutely fantastic. So seriously, this is a phenomenal industry, just an absolutely phenomenal industry. And any of us can be involved to the degree we want to be. Maybe you're a student pilot, maybe you're a sport pilot, maybe you're an ATP exercising your sport pilot privileges while you fly a light sport aircraft. It's all okay. The whole reason that we do this, Ask an Ambassador, is so folks like you have an opportunity to talk to CFIs like myself or Pat or Kay and ask questions that maybe you're not willing to ask somebody in person, or maybe something just pops into your head as we chat. Kay has a background as an engineer. She is brilliant. Pat is a designated pilot examiner. I'm just a CFI and an AMP, and I have spell check on my computer, so I write stories. But I'm telling you, this is a big, broad industry. And if you're a 15-year-old kid in high school, or if you're a 75-year-old who's saying, you know, I always wanted to do that, do that. The youngest person I ever flew with, letting them fly the plane, was 8. The oldest was 77. They both did just fine. So with that, and Bruce Kalin, nice to see you. Everybody's congratulating Janessa. Janessa, I hope you feel especially pretty tonight and much appreciated, because our hearts go out to you. You did a great thing. We think the world of you. Thank you, Janessa. And with that, I'm going to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you have a wonderful holiday with your family, your friends, your neighbors, whatever works for you. And we'll be right back here on December 14th, which is, of course, is a Tuesday, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. You're smart people. I'll let you do the math for the Mountain and Central time zones, but I'll see you back then. Donnie will be at the switch as he always is. Donnie McKay, our producer, who makes me look like I know what I'm doing. So until December 14th, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Gain tons of weight. Go ahead and eat the pie. Don't worry about it. We can get back to the diet later, and we'll talk to you next time. Y'all take care now. Good night.